and I talk about this a lot more in repair planning than I do in this class, right? But it's our parts, right? So when I talk about repair planning to people, the goal when we take the car apart is to get 100% of a parts order. Make sense? It's not that look, I'd love 100% of an estimate that's supplement free after we disassemble the car. It's a difficult ask, right? But I will tell you, I have shops out there that have a defined disassembly process or a blueprint or repair planning or whatever you want to call it, that are supplement free 7 out of 10 cars. Now think about that for a second. So 70% of the time when they disassemble the car, they're not making any more parts orders on that car. Just think about for a second, I touched on it earlier, what really slows cars from leaving your shop and hitting your ECD and making people happy is accurate disassemblies that get you an accurate parts order, because what stops them from going home is you having to go order another part, right? And what tends to happen, when do we find those little pieces that we need?
When it's about to be delivered.
Yeah, Friday at 2 o'clock after we've already told Mrs. Jones that her shit's going to be ready at 4, right? And then we're like, hey, you know I told you it's going to be ready at 4, but we just found, free $2 brackets that we got to have to put your car back together, and no one has them in stock, so it's going to be Monday. Now, in our world, we're, like, shit, damn it, how'd you miss that, whatever. Your customer's thinking, these people have got to be the dumbest people I've ever dealt with in my life. How did they, think about like how your mom or somebody who's not in this industry would look at that. How do you get to the end of this thing and not know that you need these 3 brackets? Now, we in this room know how we get there, right? But the people who bring their cars to you, I promise you, when they hang up the phone, even if they're nice to you when you give them the bad news, they're hanging up and they're going, what a bunch of morons, right? I'm just telling you, that's what they do, So, how we can make that, avoid that should be our #1 priority, right? And that comes from not disassembling the car completely. That's mostly what it comes from, right? So, and having all of our parts is what's going to keep it moving. But when we write consistent estimates right, and we have the parts we need, and just one more thing I'll say on that, right? Look, when I ran the shop that I ran, blueprinting, repair planning, all this stuff that I'm talking to you about, it wasn't a thing. I ran my shop just like y'all are probably running yours, a very traditional approach. I call it the strategy of hope. I'd write an RO, I'd throw it out in the shop, and then I'd turn around and say, man, I hope he finds everything, we get a good parts order, and that thing goes home on time, and the CSI's good, right? That's a strategy of hope, right? And it's kind of what we do, right? And it's not a very consistent result that we can get out of that. But if we start to get more consistent, here's what happens, right? We get a good parts order, we reduce cycle time, we reduce supplement delays, we improve CSI, right? Why? Because the cars are leaving on time. And what are the 2 things that customers complain about in the auto and the collision industry? They're the 2 biggest complaints on a CSI survey, do you know? Doesn't matter where you go, too. It's across the country. It's the same, right?
Time and quality.
My car wasn't ready on time.
Communication.
No one told me my car wasn't going to be ready on time, which is communication, right? So those are the things. So here's what I tell people. If you get a better process in place and cars start going home on time, your CSI comes up naturally, right? Because even if you didn't communicate very well to them, if their car was ready on time, when they get that CSI review, they're going to be much happier, right, when they fill it out, because those are the things that twist people off. The other thing that happens when you start getting consistent and only doing things once, by the way, and by the way, when I talk about these multiple parts orders, what does that do to your staff? It's not just the tech, right, that has to take the car and put it outside and then go get another one and play this in and out game, right? But whoever's ordering parts, don't they have to make another order, and then possibly more returns and all those type of things. So when we do these redundant steps, it puts a lot of extra work on top of our entire staff. So what happens when we start getting more consistent and accurate is we improve ESI, right? That's not something probably anybody in here is measuring, right? But your employee satisfaction is actually something that big companies are really starting to measure, right? And it's really kind of an important stat, because people are starting to figure out, especially in our world of millennials, no offense to my millennials, that their work-life balance is much more important to them than, money per se. Whereas my generation, or our generation, for those of you as old as me, it was more about money than it was work-life balance. For them, it's work-life balance. So if your people working for you are happy, it's going to spill over to your customers. It's just that simple, right? That's why you see a lot of big companies going to 4-day work weeks and things like that. Did Google just do that, or somebody just did that? I saw on the news. When we do all those things, it also improves productivity, right? Hell, naturally it improves productivity if we're more accurate. It could lead to additional sales and definitely fewer returns. If we're more accurate, we've got less returns. And if you've ever all of a sudden looked up at your shop and you realize you've got returns that need to be returned, but they're past the point of return, that's a write-off, right? And it happens to us on occasion, so that's even worse. So how does it benefit our customer and the insurance company? It reduces cycle time, which is probably the most important thing, by the way, to your insurance provider, right? Why? Rental, right? They spend more money on rental than they do just about anything. I had a guy at State Farm tell me if they can shave one day off of all their claims across the country, it saves them $1 million a day. I don't know what that number is now. Honestly, I don't even know if he made that up when he told me that, but it's probably fairly accurate, really. So that's why they spend a lot of time on that. It helps retention of policyholders. Shockingly, I know we may not think so, but this is exactly why DRPs were brought into play, right? It wasn't to control rates or prices or whatever. At the end of the day, they really feel like, and there's some truth to it, that if they can control the repair, that they can keep people from defecting. Does that make sense to everybody? So the funny thing is, why I bring that up, is that the OEM has now figured out the same thing. So what we've always known, and the insurance companies have known, and why they try to push direct repair so heavy, is that if they can control the repair and people leave your shop happy, they're not going to quit State Farm, they're not going to quit you, and they're also going to be happy with whatever car line that they're driving, right? What happens a lot of times in the real world is a Honda owner gets steered by an insurance company to a direct repair shop and they have a bad experience, right? And when that bad experience happens, here's what happens. They no longer trust their insurance company. They don't like the shop that they got brought to. And what the OEM, the car makers, have figured out over collecting data for the last decade is that they also no longer want their Honda. So what happens, and it's nothing Honda did, or it's the same scenario for your Nissan owners or whatever it is, what people do when they have a bad experience like that is they try to get all of that away from them. So what they tend to do when they have a bad one is they sell their Honda and they buy a Nissan or they buy a Toyota. And so what Honda and Nissan and Toyota have all figured out is that, hey, whoa, what's the most important thing to both of those companies, the people who make the cars and the insurance companies, it's the same problem. It's the retention, right? That's what they want. They want people, when they go have their car fixed at your shop, to leave there, be happy, and then go buy another Nissan. That's what they really care about. Matter of fact, all of this OEM stuff, you think it's about part sales, it's got literally zero to do with part sales. They don't give a crap about that. All they care about is selling cars and keeping you buying cars. The parts piece is just a little extra thing. Because keep in mind, OEMs are selling their parts no matter what, right? Because they sell them to the dealer sells them. So it's like a third-party deal. It's like me loading her up with paint. I don't care, I already sold the damn paint. Now she's got to figure out how to get rid of the paint, right? It's the same kind of process, right? So, again, same stuff. It improves CSI, right? When people are happy and they have no problems, CSI goes up, right? It improves quality, fewer unexpected delays, and reduces legal exposure, right? Makes sense to everybody? So when everything's done well, your data shows that you're less apt to sue someone over it. It's just how it is. You remember, I don't know if they did this in Houston, but Progressive started it a long time ago before their concierge places opened up, where they would have a wreck and then someone would run up in their little Irv. Yeah, that was you? You were the Irv guy? Yeah. So why did they do that?
They wanted to be the first on the scene.
Why?
So they could capture the business.
Right.
You
Oh,
could
wow.
try to make sure that they found that if every person had an accident, they were losing customers because of the service that they got. So
Right.
they wanted to have the best service. Either right when the accident happened, to know that they're there to take care of
And
you.
get the statement,
Get
right?
everything.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and reduce this, right? So the point that I heard, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, from people at Progressive is that, look, if we get out there to the scene and we meet them and we make sure they're okay and we get their statement, we don't get sued near as often, right? So that was part of their go-to, right? Is that kind of,
Well, and they trust you more.
they trust you more, yeah, well, they do act like you care.
You get your rental, you get them all set up, you take care of the tow, whatever it needs, so.
Right. Yeah. So it's all about, though, at the end of the day, that whole program and all the programs they have in place, you think it's about gigging you for money or this or that. All they really care about is retention of their customers. And the OE and the insurance companies are exactly the same. They just have two different reasons for the same design. Does that make sense to everybody? So that's the deal. And the other thing you got to understand about insurance companies, it's a lot harder for them to retain people now than what it once was because of the marketing that's out there, right? So 20 years ago, I think most of us that are old enough in here would agree, or even 15 years ago, when your new policy would come in the mail, right? Everybody remember the mailbox, shit would come in the mailbox and you'd open up and look at it. And then you'd sign that policy, right? And you'd just send it back in because that's what we did. We didn't shop them, that's my point. Now we shop them. Everybody shop their insurance when it's time for it to come up again now. It's pretty much a non-stop deal. So right now, just so you know, 15 years ago, the defect rate for any of us in this room to leave your insurance company at an annual sign-up was only 4%. Do you know what that number is now? 24. So, you think about what's happened over that time. Who rules the roost with advertising at the Super Bowl now? It ain't Budweiser anymore. It's not Coca-Cola or Pepsi or any of them. It's all of them, right? Think about it. Think about the last few Super Bowls. The Lizard's there, the Mayhem guy's there, Flo's there. They're all there, right? They're all out spending, because that's how that works. They're out spending big alcohol for the advertising at the Super Bowls, right? You know why? Because 24% of their clientele is up for bid every 12 months. So now they spend the money to market for it, to advertise for it. And what do they say? Like, is it Geico that says 15 minutes or less if you get online? And then Esurance has come back and said, hell, 15 minutes, we can do it in 7, right? Isn't that their commercial, right? So they're, that's their sell. They're making it easy to do, Okay. So decisions that we have to make, right? Estimating decisions, right? We need to make decisions on labor rates and materials, right? Guidelines for a fleet program. To be quite honest, those decisions are set before you write it, right? Would you not agree? You've already set that within your system. But it is a decision that we have to make, okay? Parts damage, do you think that we make decisions on whether or not parts are damaged?
Yeah.
Yes, of course, right? How about prior versus accident related? Do we look at that kind of stuff? Of course we do, right? We look at the loss facts, if we're DRP, if we so happen to give them. If not, we listen to our customer, we ask them questions, they tell us what happened in the wreck, and our mind's already determining that kind of stuff, right? Now that doesn't mean if someone's sitting there and telling us that their right tail lamp is broken from when they got hit in the left front, that we're gonna look them in the eye and say, ma'am, you're crazy as hell. We might let their insurance company tell them that instead, right? But my point is we know, right, that most likely that right tail lamp did not get damaged and that left front did, right? Repair versus replace. We make decisions on repair versus replace all day when we're writing estimates, do we not? Yes. Judgment time. Parts usage. What I mean by parts usage is what kind of parts are we going to use, right? Are we heavy DRP and we've got to get 5 reference numbers on used or aftermarket, or are we going OE, right? Have we looked up the OEM specifications and say whether or not we can or cannot use said part, right? That's a big thing right now. And the P, and I say P pages or any additional operations, right? That comes into play. And I could add, and it will be added in the next class, is looking up OEM procedures and processes, right? Because that's what we've got to be doing now, right? Make sense? Anything to add to that stuff? You guys are being pretty quiet. Okay. So on that note, so consensus building, right? So the consensus building is the process of having everyone look at something the same way and then making the same or consistent decision about what they see and how to approach repairing it, right? It's what we're talking about in this traditional approach to estimating right now that we're looking at. If we get a consistent method and consistent approach, we're going to talk about a few tools you can use, then we're going to get a more consistent result, right? So, within consensus building, do you think us in this room that we could form a consensus, right? In other words, kind of agree, right? Have a consensus on what labor rate, material rates, and guidelines we're going to charge for a fleet program. Do you think we can form a consensus on that? Sure we can, right? Because that's a decision that you made. A business decision is my owners in here or whatever it might be.